Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D. It is my pleasure to have you here today. Today, we're going to take a little turn from talking about fishing and go into hunting because this is kind of the hunting season. A lot of people think about deer, or maybe they start to think about turkey. But today, we're going to talk about upland hunting. And I want to bring in my two special guests, Reid and Robbie Parker, a father-son team. First of all, thank you both for joining me today.
Yeah,
thanks for having us, Matt. Yeah.
My pleasure. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess the simple question, and it's probably not a simple answer, is, Robbie, we'll start with you. What is upland hunting?
It seems pretty simple. Upland hunting is really, best definition would be bird hunting. And there's a couple of different species that fall into, you mentioned turkey, that technically would be an upland bird. Mm-hmm. In Virginia, particularly central Virginia, it's going to be migratory bird like dove and woodcock. They fall into this upland realm, but it's away or out of the water, and you're hunting in cultivated or uncultivated fields and also in the woodlands, and the upland being out away from the water. And for us, another upland bird that's indigenous to Virginia or North America anyhow would be the bobwhite quail.
So you already mentioned a couple of different pheasant, quail, turkey. There's a plethora of other birds that you are going for in upland hunting. Specifically in Virginia, though, what are you going after? Is it all those and more?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you talk upland across the country, there's a whole list of species. Right. In Virginia, the birds that we're going to hunt upland in a wild nature are going to be dove. That's usually the earlier part of the season. It's a different type of hunting, but traditional upland hunting in Virginia is going to be quail and woodcock, American woodcock.
Gotcha. And Reid, I'm going to ask the simple question here. Was it dad teaching son? Is that how you got involved in upland hunting, or was this a curiosity that you saw?
No, that was absolutely what it was. I mean, I have I grew up duck hunting and upland hunting, and I've got really early childhood memories kind of before we got our first dog, so we hunt with dogs a lot, of going out to the dove field with my dad and him shooting doves and me running out into the field to grab the downed bird. So, I mean, that's like some of my earliest childhood memories. So it's very much so dad teaching me and kind of bringing me up into this world.
And so, I mean, that's a great childhood because it's awesome to have that father-son bonding experience with anything, but when you can share a passion, because I can hear the passion in your voice, Robbie, it really makes it fun. It must be special for you.
Yeah, it was great for me. I had similar experiences as a child, but to bring Reid, and he has two sisters, they've all come along before, and he has a younger brother who has come along and certainly is an upland hunter and a waterfowler. But yeah, it does mean it's a real special time when we're together in the field.
The sport of upland hunting, this isn't sit in a tree stand and wait for the deer to come by. This is a little bit more, how would I say it, hardcore, a little bit more involved. Can you explain, both of you can explain kind of the process of doing upland hunting?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the hardcore. I think there's a lot of walking, generally speaking. So I can give you an example. Last Monday, the woodcock season came in Virginia, and I went with a friend of mine. We probably covered 6 miles in about 3 hours on some uneven terrain in a lot of really thick cover. So you're going to do an awful lot of walking. That gives you the opportunity to catch up, to talk, but most importantly for us is to watch what's going on in front of you, and that's the dog work, which we really enjoy, probably more than anything else. But it is not, it's not easy. Even the turkey hunters who spend a fair amount of time sitting, calling the bird in, and again, they're an upland bird, will tell you that there's a lot of hard work. You cover a lot of ground to get to where you need to be to find the birds.
And so, Reid, you mentioned this, your dad just mentioned this as well, the use of dogs. Why is that important? Does it make it easier? Why are you using dogs?
I think it does make it easier. So, we use dogs that are kind of specifically bred to do this. So we hunt with Llewellyn setters a lot, which are kind of like a special breed of English setters. They're slightly smaller. They're like a Welsh line of English setters, and they were specifically bred to hunt grouse and woodcock. So, it certainly does make it a lot easier. I've gone and tried to woodcock hunt without a dog. And I mean, when you're woodcock hunting with a dog, you're walking 6 miles, and then If you're trying to do it without a dog, you're just kind of zigzagging back and forth through really tough cover. You're essentially trying to be the dog, which it doesn't work out super well. I mean, you can do it. It's just a lot harder. That being said, I think there's also a really traditional and almost like artful or poetic nature to hunting with a dog as well. I think when it clicks for people, when upland bird hunting, when I like see people really start to appreciate it for what it is they start saying things like, I just love to watch that dog work, because you're watching the dog kind of do what it was honestly born to do.
Right.
In a way, it's kind of like living out this really simple purpose in this really cool way. So I'd say yes, that A, it makes it a lot easier, but B, it's like, I think it is a kind of quintessential nature of upland hunting. I wouldn't want to upland hunt without dogs,
Right.
like, for a lot of reasons.
What is the training that goes into these dogs? Is this something you're doing during the off season? I mean, this isn't, I mean, I know there's some natural instinct to the dog, but there's a lot of work that has to be done, I'm sure.
You want me to take that one?
Yeah, I do.
I'll back up. This is how smart Reid is, and I've taught him so well. He mentioned grouse,
Right.
and it's a bird that I personally don't hunt a lot of. I will go occasionally, but it's a bird that is definitely an upland bird, very challenging and in very difficult terrain. Generally going to find them in the western part of the state or in the mountains. So back to your point about the difficult nature of hunting upland birds. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the grouse, and I'd get a lot of grief from some of my friends. So, but back to the dogs, it's constant training. Even during the season, when you're out hunting, you're watching the dog. You learn to read the dog. You work as a team. The genetics are there. These dogs are genetically programmed to use their nose to find game. And to borrow a phrase, typically these dogs are really just domesticated predators. So they're using their senses and their skills to actually find this game that they would ideally, primarily, like to find, kill, and eat. But we work to help them kind of help us work as a team. So they'll use those senses to find the birds. The point is natural. Sometimes we do a little bit of work there, but where we really get involved is to teach them to stand, to allow us to come up, move the birds, or have another dog that's function is to move the birds, put them in the air, so that we might get a good, clean, safe shot.
When you say a good, clean, safe shot, we want them at a certain elevation then to take that shot. Obviously, we don't want to just shoot low in the horizon, right?
Great. That's a great question, Matt. We talk a lot about that with folks. A safe shot in our mind is with the barrel up. We encourage people when we're guiding or hunting on our own, our muzzle or the barrel is always up, safety's always on, because the dogs are working around us a lot of times, or just in front of us. But a safe shot is going to be maybe 50 or 90 degrees and up. And so there's an expression, don't shoot until you see the blue of the sky behind the bird. That's a super safe shot, and that's what we encourage most often.
And so let's talk about the type of equipment that you're using here. You mentioned, you're using a gun. I'm assuming it's a shotgun. Is that what you're using?
That's correct.
Yeah. So Reid, why don't we get you back in on this? So tell me about what kind of shotguns you're using, shells and things like that.
Yeah, so you can use anything from a 410 size a shotgun all the way up to, I'd say, a 12 gauge for upland hunting, and anything in between. So I'd say probably the most common shotgun gauge for upland hunting is a 20 gauge. You don't need a super big shot size for these birds at all. You typically want a gun that's lighter weight, because you're walking a lot, right? So a lot of the times you'll see folks, the kind of traditional, I guess, upland bird hunting gun would be an over and under shotgun or a side-by-side, something with a breakable action. That's kind of easy to kind of sling over your shoulder some as you're walking, or kind of hold a bit easier. And so that means, you got 2 shells in there, but some people also hunt with pumps and then semi-automatics as well. I grew up hunting with a pump shotgun, and now I hunt with a over-under.
And so when somebody contacts you, you're going to both guide somebody. Are they bringing their own shotguns? Are you recommending? Are you allowing to use yours? How is that all working? Like, I know when you hire a fly guide, right? Reid, when you fly fish, you're like, hey, use my stuff. We're all set up, that kind of a thing. But there is something about rifle ownership and gun ownership too?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, by and large, people have their own gun because they're comfortable with it. But, what we're seeing in all the outdoor activities and sports, and you probably have seen this yourself, Matt, we're just talking about your friend fishing, more new people coming to experience the outdoors and from a sportsman's standpoint. So whether that's fly fishing or upland bird hunting, a lot of folks are going the equipment route first, or they'll try something out and then they come back. So by and large, people have their own gun. Okay. The photos that the one there with, that's Reid's dog Koo and some woodcock in an open 28 gauge.
Right.
But by and large, people come with their own guns. And that's good because we know that they have at least some degree of comfort. We can provide a gun. We're both in a situation somewhere where we can rent them a gun or arrange for a gun rental.
Right.
But so they don't actually need a gun, but by and large, people come with their own gun.
And so that brings me to my next question. So someone like me, I've never hunted in my life. The last time I used a gun, and don't laugh at this, was a BB gun, probably at, camp in the 3rd grade. I mean, you probably need to have at least some knowledge and maybe have shot before you decide, hey, Reid, I'd like to hire you and your dad, right? I mean, you want to have somebody with at least a little experience.
Yep, and Virginia has a tremendous hunter education program, and the game department does a tremendous job with that. All the instructors are volunteers, except there's someone who works for the Department of Wildlife Resources. So we highly recommend that hunter education, that hunter safety course. And I've taken it. It's a very in-depth course. You get a card that certifies you've taken the course. But as an adult, you're not required to take it. So if someone were to come to us and say they wanted to go upland hunting, we would probably spend a fair amount of time with them, with the gun, to make sure that they were comfortable. They knew how to operate and handle the gun, all the gun's features, and because a fun hunt is not fun unless it's safe.
That's what I was going to say. It's better to be safe than sorry. I mean,
Absolutely.
To put it where it's at. So the safety course offered by DWR is really the number one thing somebody should do before they make that phone call, before they drop that email.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I gotcha. You mentioned some of the pictures here, and I wanted to just get back into this. So this is one of the dogs, and these are, I'll bring it up full here. Robbie, these are these woodcocks?
American woodcock.
American woodcocks, okay. And then the next picture I'm going to bring up here, is that Reid's grouse?
No. I wish.
That's a chucker. They're not a bird that's indigenous to North America.
Okay.
They came over, I'm going to guess maybe 150 to 200 years ago they were brought over, but they're initially, you'll find them in the dry, mountainous, arid regions of the Middle East. Afghanistan, Turkey, Iraq. They have established themselves out in the western part of the country. So people do go hunt wild chucker in Idaho, Washington State, Oregon, places like that. Very difficult bird to hunt in their more native environment. So we don't have that here.
Right.
They're a bird that you can hunt on many of the preserves throughout Virginia.
When Reid was on previously, we were talking, I think it was smallmouth and gar, or maybe it was gar and bowfin, I can't remember. Simone talked about you with grouse hunting. And he said it's really impossible. What makes grouse hunting, because you actually said, Robbie, I can't believe I forgot it, but what makes grouse hunting so difficult compared to some of the other birds that you're going after?
I'm going to let you handle that one.
There's a multitude of factors. I'd say the really thick and dense cover that you find those birds in. So you find woodcock in pretty thick and dense cover, but it's relatively speaking pretty flat, right? They're if you look at like the path of a migration of a woodcock, they kind of hug, I won't say the coast, but kind of like the Piedmont area in the coastal ranges. So where you hunt them, it's a little flatter. So with grouse, you have less birds because they're not migratory, and we have decent grouse numbers in Virginia, like a lot of native upland species like quail. They've kind of been slightly on the decline since around the 70s, so there's less of them available. So if you've heard someone talk about musky fishing, you talk about, we moved a fish, we saw a fish, right? So that's a good day if you moved a couple fish. That's the same with grouse hunting. If you move a couple grouse, if you see, say, 3 grouse in a day, get a point from your dog, that's a great day kind of thing, right? It's really about kind of like seeing them. They're kind of, I heard someone call them like
Kind of like the unicorn of hunting.
the ghost bird of the woods. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, you got really thick, dense cover, and you're going for, at max, a handful of birds. I think the most I've ever moved in one day was 7 birds.
Wow.
I shot one time, and it was not even close.
So, okay, so explain that to me. So you moved a bird, you shot once. Is that because the bird stayed low in the horizon? You didn't get that don't shoot until you see the blue mentality? Why? Like, if I see a bird, I want to pull the trigger.
Right.
But again, I guess they have to be in the right range, the right sight, all that.
Right. So you probably saw some of the pictures that were up here that were like open fields.
Yeah.
That is not the case. Like that, you're not hunting grouse in that kind of environment whatsoever.
Gotcha.
You're in, like, you're going up a
Something
fire road and national forest land in the mountains of Virginia, and it is very, very, very thick. And so you're almost always in trees, you know, and like pretty.
So it's not a
dense
beautiful
cover.
path like this.
Right. So it's like sometimes you just hear the grouse get up, you don't even see the grouse a lot of the time. And so, you know, when you're training a bird dog and they go on point and it's a good point and there's a bird there, part of the reward system for that dog, if that bird flushes and they held point, is to shoot. And so I had a really good point from my dog, and grouse will also run on the ground really far before they get up. So a lot of these birds, they want to hunker down first as their first line of defense, then they want to run, and the absolute last thing a grouse wants to do is fly to get away. And so you flew, and so I kind of shot almost just as a reward for my dog because he pointed it well,
Gotcha.
and I had a really small window to kind of shoot that bird, and I missed. And then after that, I didn't have a shot. My window on a grouse or even a woodcock sometimes can be a window that's about 1 foot to 2 feet wide.
So let's get into a little bit of seasonality, because we're now in fall. So we mentioned woodcock, we mentioned grouse, turkey. Are these all in quote-unquote season now for hunting? And when do the seasons continue on with?
That's a great question. So the wild bird season, so for grouse in Virginia, I believe that came in early October.
Okay.
And it'll go through January. Woodcock is a migratory bird. Excuse me. So it's a 45-day season. There'll be a season that's in now. It came in last Monday. It'll go out just after Thanksgiving. There's a bit of a break, and it comes in right after Christmas and lasts till mid-January. That's a season that's set at the federal level.
Okay.
Or the state works very closely with the government the federal government to set the season in each individual state. Quail are in. They came in the beginning of November, and they'll run through the middle of January as well. And then for us, I mentioned dove earlier. It's a migratory bird.
Right.
Excuse me, but technically an upland bird. And they come in September. They have a couple different closures, but they'll go in through January as well. In Virginia, in a lot of states, upland hunting takes place at some of the managed preserves, upland hunting preserves.
Right.
And the preserve season in Virginia comes in September 15th and runs, I believe, to the middle of April.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of opportunity that way. There's no breaks in that season.
So if you hunt in a preserve, you can hunt that bird even if there is a break? Is that what I'm understanding?
So it's a great question, but those birds are released birds.
Okay.
So they're not going to be wild, and most of the preserves will do quail, chukar, and pheasant.
Gotcha.
And they're birds that are raised on a game bird farm, and then they're released in these preserves, and then people hunt them there, usually for a fee.
That's what. So a preserve is, do you have to be a member of a preserve to hunt, or is it just a fee that anybody can then go hunt?
Yeah, great question. They're all private,
Okay.
but they're open to the public by and large. So the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources has a tremendous website, and I always encourage people to go there for information. And if you just did a search there on upland hunting preserves or game preserves, the whole list by county comes up with the contact information. So in Central Virginia, there's at least 5 that you could drive to here fairly easily. And they're all available on that website. And they have contact information, and you essentially would go on, call, schedule, and book a hunt. And you can a lot of times kind of tailor what you want. You could say, I just want all quail, or I like a kind of a mixed opportunity. If you're by yourself and don't have a dog, they're generally going to be happy to pair you with a guide and his dogs
Okay.
or her dogs. So there's a lot of opportunity that way. It's a great way for people to get introduced to upland hunting before they, contact somebody in Kansas and book a 10-day hunt out there.
So, I mean, that's the thing, right? So, easier to do it in your backyard one day, see if you like it kind of a thing. Right, exactly. And you mentioned if you're solo and you go on to the DWR website and you look at upland hunting and these preserves, they would pair you with a guide. And that's some of the things that you both get hooked up with because you're both guides in upland hunting. How long have you been guiding, Robbie?
The first party that I ever guided on an upland hunt was Y2K on New Year's Day.
Wow.
I woke up and the world was still here. So luckily I had a hunt. I went that day, that day of 2000, so 24 years.
And Reid, how long have you been guiding for upland hunting?
About the same amount of time I've been fishing guiding, so I'd say around 5-6 years.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha. And I'm sure every year is different too because the foliage changes, the structure changes that you're hunting in. So is it where you find, like I always think I relate it to fishing. I always got lucky here, but if a flood happens, it changes. Does that happen also when you're hunting? Birds nest into a different area and things like that.
I think that, yes, the short answer is yes. I'll use woodcock and then quail as two quick examples. So the woodcock are migratory. There's a number of things that determine when they migrate and how far they go. They like that you saw in the photo, they have that long bill or beak, and they like to be able to stick that in the ground to pull out earthworms and other bugs that might be down in the soft ground. So they need soft ground. They're going to migrate on a kind of a circadian rhythm. Certain moon phases, times of the year, temperature changes is what's going to drive them to migrate. So if you have crazy conditions, that might influence the number of birds that migrate or stay here.
Gotcha.
A few years ago, we had a really, really hard freeze in January, right at the peak of the woodcock season, and most people believe, I personally believe, that they said, we're out of here. We can't, the ground's too hard, we can't eat.
Right.
So they flew south where they found south ground. The temperature changed a little bit toward the last 4 to 5 days of the season, and they seem to be back. So with the woodcock, I think that's a great example. But with quail, they're again not a migratory bird. They struggle for a number of reasons. Virginia used to be probably one of the top quail hunting destinations in the country. This might have been back in the 50s. But their habitat has changed so much. The numbers are way down pretty much across the country. Some areas have more than others. Virginia, I think most people would agree that there tends to be now a bit of a comeback with the bobwhite quail, but those numbers are still way down, and it's mainly due to habitat loss, predation, and I would generally say overhunting, but I don't think that's the case. Most guys that I talk to now say if they find a wild covey of quail, they may take one or two, but they don't take any more, and they're out quail hunting, but they're restricting their bag limits. The state has restricted the bag limits some, shortened the season a little bit. But so hopefully that answers your question. There are some things that influence when and where you're going to find birds.
Yeah, no, I did for sure. I think that I have so many questions. It's unbelievable. I'm trying to wrap my brain. I want to talk quickly turkey because I mean, that's what I always knew as bird hunting. I have some friends who do some quail and pheasant in upstate New York and New England, but I always hear them going for turkeys, getting the big tom with the neck and all that. Is that something that's also really fun for you guys to chase as well, or do you like the smaller bird?
I'll speak to turkey. I'm far from a turkey expert, but I have had some experience. So I can tell you that's one of Virginia's greatest conservation success stories.
Right.
So when I first got exposed to turkey hunting was in the early 80s while I was in college, and you bought a tag like you would buy a deer tag, and there was one turkey tag on there. That was it. And the season was really short and restricted. Those birds were essentially gone from Virginia, reintroduced, managed appropriately, and again, one of the state's greatest conservation success stories. I mean, they're back for sure.
Right.
I don't really turkey hunt much unless I get a good invitation now, but it's a very, very challenging bird.
Because of the call,
So most guys will like to go in the springtime. You can hunt them in the fall, and a lot of folks do. I've seen pictures of guys who have shot turkey while they're archery hunting. So,
Right.
but the spring is the biggest challenge because that's when the birds tend to come together and mate. The gobbler or the male has kind of, he's a little less focused, but he's still very wily, and it's very challenging from finding the right cover, finding the birds, and then being able to call them within range. They have very keen eyesight.
That's what I've heard.
For a bird that's that big, they can hide really well. And another bird that would probably rather run than fly can literally just disappear in a second. He's there, and all of a sudden he's gone. So very challenging.
And Reid, do you do any turkey hunting? Do you find similar, or are you not into?
It's not that I'm not into turkey hunting. Kind of like what he said. If I get the invite, I will go. But since the kind of prime time to hunt turkey is in the spring, I'm usually on the water in the spring.
I can't picture what might be in the spring on the water. I have no idea. I've only seen you out there every time, and I still can't catch no. All right, so a picture that I have up here, and I want to get back to this one right here. There's a lot of guys in this group. Do you hunt as a large group? Is it usually one-on-one? Or is it whatever the clients want?
Another great question. So typically it's going to be, if we're at a preserve, and I believe that picture is at a preserve, so it's going to be what the clients want. And I think Reid would agree, as an individual guide, I like to take 2, maybe 3 people. I'll take 4, and 4 is not any less safe than 3, but you are working harder because you're managing just that extra gun. But sometimes the clients will say, look, we're bringing out 8 of our closest friends and family, so we'll get 2 guides, and we'll try to split them up a little bit. 2 is an ideal number. 3 works really well. 4 can work. It's just a lot more work on our end.
So really, the number you're looking at is 2 like this.
That's the ideal.
Ideal number, I would say, yeah.
Now, this looks like a really successful hunt here. There's a lot of birds on the back of the pickup. Reid, I stole this from your Instagram. You want to tell us a little bit about this hunt?
Yeah, that was the second time I hunted with these 2 guys. So that was at a preserve in Virginia. So they called up the first time they called up the preserve and said, "Hey, we want to do a hunt, pheasant, chukar, quail." And then I got assigned to the hunt, and then we ended up just hitting it off super well. They were very, very safe shots and very, very good shots. I mean, you see, the pile of birds up on there, which is great. You might think they hit them first shot every time, but the thing I liked about these guys the most is they passed up on a lot of shots, right? There were shots that they maybe could have taken, but part of like the safety talk that I tell people is I kind of top it off with, if it doesn't feel like a safe shot, just don't take it.
Right.
Like, it's not worth it, and there's a good chance we'll be able to go and hunt that bird up again. And so there was a lot of times these guys passed up on shots, which I always really respect about hunters. I think it takes a lot of discipline and control to know when to not shoot, right? And so I think that hunt was the perfect example of the best hunt or the most fun hunt is a safe hunt. Like they had a very safe hunt, and they got a lot of birds that day.
And okay, so let's get into we talked about the timing of the species, but what about the timing of the day? So I contact a preserve, I'm assigned to Robbie or Reid or both of you. What time am I meeting you? How is the day shaping up, and what are we doing?
Yeah, again, another great question. So I refer to a lot of times as gentleman's hunting. I mean, we're not going to start, especially at a preserve, we're not going to start super early. I can think of a couple preserves that I've guided around here. A morning hunt might start at the earliest at 8 or 8:30. There is a preserve locally that will have you come early and go down to a 5-stand range, shoot a box of shells at clay targets. That does a couple of things. That helps you get reacquainted with your gun if you haven't shot in a while, but it also gives me as the guide the opportunity to see how you handle the gun and make some suggestions, mainly from a safety standpoint. I'm not a shooting instructor, but I can give some basic tips, if you will, but we're really looking to see how comfortable you are with your gun. So by and large, the morning hunts will start 8:30, 9 o'clock. You might hunt for 3 hours at a preserve. An afternoon hunt might start around 1 or 1:30, and the same thing. You may hunt 3.5 hours, sometimes 4. But that's generally how the preserves will work. And that's a lot. You cover a lot of ground in that amount of time. And most folks at the end of those hunts, a 3-hour hunt, are pretty gassed and happy. It's a lot like golf. Toward the end of the hunt, you really have to be a lot more focused. We have to watch them even more. The tendency is to drop their gun sometimes, and the mental part can be a little taxing at the end of a hunt as well.
Because, I mean, I don't think most people are used to trekking 3, 4, 5, 6 miles uphill rough terrain on a daily basis. They're, I walk to the office, I walk in the parking lot, I walk in, the shopping center. It's a lot less rigorous than what this is. Yeah,
correct.
I get that. And is it good to do consecutive days of booking? Like this, maybe you get a feel for a particular land, and then the second day you're kind of like, all right, I know where we're going to be, I know how we're moving, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I don't think they have to be consecutive days, but if look, I'm into this and I want to experience it a few times, consecutive days is a great way. And I have had people book consecutive days. But you certainly don't have to do that. You can book a day and then come back the next week or come back even the next month. The terrain is going to be the same.
Yep.
The cover may look different. It may not be as thick as it falls during the winter and lays down. But the and air temperature, well, you would know this better than anybody else, the weather. So, there's a number of factors going into that, but I do have a number of people that will book consecutive days.
Interesting. And then, so speaking of the weather, is there a preference in your mind, or Reid in your mind, of hunting on a cloudy day, a rainy day, or a day where there's maybe some snow cover? Is there a benefit to any of those?
Yeah, there is. For the dogs, by and large, not so much the birds, although it can influence. I like it cool. The cooler the better. In the 40s, in my mind, is great, with a little bit of breeze to help the dogs some. I have gone in the snow and had some great hunts. I've gone in the snow and had some really, really poor hunts. I generally don't like to go in the rain. So these are birds that don't have a lot of oil in their feathers when you think of like waterfowl or ducks. Flying in the rain is very difficult for them. And again, they're ground dwellers, so they'd rather stay on the ground, and the rain just kind of keeps them there, even especially at a preserve.
Gotcha.
Keeps them there even more.
Gotcha. Reid, when he said snow, you shook your head. You were not a big fan of hunting
Well,
in the
no,
snow.
I think on a preserve, I'm not a fan of snow. When it comes to woodcock and grouse hunting, I'm very much a fan of snow.
Oh, yeah.
Because since the woodcock and grouse have to adhere to a certain type of ground and cover, and when it snows, it constricts the amount of available cover and ground. And so when you find them, you typically find a lot of them in one spot. One of the best. So I think it was that picture. It had snow in the back of the pickup truck, and there was the 3 woodcock up on there. So the limit that you can take in a day, the bag limit is 3 woodcock. And I think that was when my dog Koo there was about 1.5 years old. So he was pretty young, and that was the first time we ever shot a limit of woodcock, and it was in the snow. And I think we got our limit in about a half an hour.
Wow,
and
because they were all bundled
They were all
together.
bundled
Yeah,
up.
they were
So,
pretty tight.
you would go and find like some sort of evergreen shrub or tree that was in January. So not a lot of green cover around, right? All your stuff that's going to be green is all your evergreen trees. So you would pretty much just go and find an evergreen tree, and there'd be about 10 or 20 of them packed under a tree. It's not like that often, right? So when it comes to
Especially 'cause
snow
we haven't
and
had
woodcock
snow
hunting,
in like years.
right? So I was actually talking to one of my good friends I hunt with, and he hunted the day after me. And we were like, we just hope it snows again this year so we can have something like that.
I'm not going to tell you that
Come on,
We're
work
not
your
going to be.
magic. Yeah.
This is a El Nino year, warmer than normal.
Yeah.
Maybe drier. Yeah. So
Yes, we've experienced it all.
yeah, we really have. So this is not going to be a good year for snow. I'm just saying. So your grouse hunting is going to be, and your woodcock hunting maybe a little bit more
As difficult as always. That's
Yeah.
fine with me.
Always,
That's
yeah.
fine with
You're
me.
used to it for sure. All right. Is there anything that I should, that you guys want to mention that I haven't talked about here in this episode yet? Anything you think of?
I can't really think of much. You've asked some really good questions. I think,
Apparel, flak orange, always?
yes.
Yeah,
yes,
of course.
yes.
Is that mandated in New York State? I knew it was mandated, in Virginia. I knew it was mandated in New York State.
It is now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a percentage of your cover that has to be blaze orange or
Yep.
hunter orange. So yeah, and again, I'll speak to the preserve and then a little bit of the wild birds thing. But on the preserve, we're going to ensure that.
Yep.
If you don't have it, we'll have it. We'll get it for you. You may have to pay for it, but we'll be sure that you get it. I would say I've noticed a lot of people. I've introduced a few people and have watched them kind of progress. Excluding Reid and his brother. People generally tend to follow. There's a romantic side about bird hunting, and it really goes back to the dogs. And you see, it's no shortage of paintings and portraits. Right. Field and stream of the dog on point. That romance will suck you right in. And I'll paraphrase this quote, but you'll move quickly from, of what's in your hand or what's in your bag in terms of killed birds to what's in your heart. You really start to appreciate the outdoors. You'll fall in love with the dogs, and it becomes less and less about how many birds you bag, and more and more about the experience and the dog work.
I like to say, and this is living in the moment. You just get to, you forget about the outside world, and you're just focused on what's going on, the beauty around you, including the dogs at that point.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's a lot of overlap between folks who fly fish and folks who upland bird hunt, right? Because there's a lot of that kind of mentality is the same. There's that romantic nature and that really mindful nature of upland hunting.
One last question. You talk about the preserves a lot, and I'm picturing this very large acreage of land. How many people, and this is probably a very random question, does a preserve allow to come on and hunt at one time? Like, is it, we're going to allow 10 hunters and that preserve is now booked. This way it's not overcrowded and becoming dangerous.
Yeah, another great question. All these preserves have different acreage, and then that will lend to the number of people that they can accommodate. So I'm happy to name some if you think that will help people. Yeah. So in Hanover, there's a preserve that's called the Preserve at Dundee. There's about 150 to 200 huntable acres out there, and I think on a given day, and on a half a day, they could probably accommodate a maximum of about 12 to 16 people. That would be 4 separate hunts going out on 2 separate parcels of land. Regrettably, one of the largest, most productive hunting preserves on the East Coast closed on Sunday in Goochland. It was called Orapax. That's where I cut my teeth. Right. It had been there for a long time, and they could accommodate up to probably 40 hunters on a half day. Wow. In just various size fields. Priest View, which is up in just past Charlottesville, is a smaller preserve that I think can do probably 2 hunts at a time. Hunt's Game Preserve down in Dinwiddie is one that's been here for a while. Clint Holloway is the guy that runs that. He does a great job, and they can accommodate a number of different hunters, and they all have different opportunities, whether it's quail and chukar, quail, chukar, pheasant, or a mixed variety of ways to introduce someone to upland hunting or provide the best possible experience for a more seasoned upland hunter.
Gotcha. And just to kind of push this out there, we were talking off air, the Preserve at Dundee is the one that you are both affiliated with.
Yep, we are.
Gotcha. Very good. All right, so I want to wrap this up here, and I want to bring this up. If you would like to find out can we get your dad in? Because I think this sounds like a very fun time, and they'll help you book that whole thing. So
absolutely.
Let's one more quick question. What is, not that there's an easier, but what is probably the best bird for a beginner to cut their teeth on? Is there one that makes it an easier hunt versus going for grouse, which we now understand is impossible?
Yeah, so I'll add a comment, and I would probably encourage to hear what Reid had to say. At a preserve, I'm introducing someone, I think the chukar is probably a good bird. And again, we talked about them being out of their environment. All these ground birds would rather, the first thing they want to do is hide. The second thing they'll do from a defense mechanism is run. The last thing they want to do is fly. So the chukar hold very tight. It allows for really good dog work. We can approach and kind of curate that moment a little bit longer and make it a much more safe experience and potentially rewarding for that hunter. So my vote would be chukar, given the parameters.
And then Reid, your dad wants to hear from you on this one.
I agree with that. As far as like if it's your first time hunting upland birds, I think just booking a hunt at a preserve, I think it's a bit more of a controlled environment, which kind of lends it to be a bit of a safer environment and allows us to kind of give a little bit more instruction, right? So I think if it's your first upland hunt, I think chucker at a preserve is a great way to go. If you've kind of done a couple upland hunts at a preserve and you're ready to kind of, get some good bird contacts on wild birds, I think woodcock are the most available upland bird species that we have in Virginia from a wild bird standpoint, I'd say. And so, I wouldn't recommend that for a brand new beginner, but someone who's kind of breaking out of their first few hunts at a preserve and want to kind of progress and seeing, hey, what kind of wild birds are in my area kind of thing.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today on Off the Hook with Matty D and bringing me a lot of knowledge on upland hunting because I had very little going in. So this was very educational for me. I appreciate it. Robbie and Reid,
Pleasure's all
thank you.
mine, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
My pleasure. And once again, if you want to book Robbie and Reid, you can easily like to do, and then book that hunt. For everyone, have a great day. We'll see you again next time for another edition of Off the Hook with Matty D. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D.